I want to thank FlexiFuse for sponsoring this video. Are you looking for fabric scrap ideas? Today's tutorial has 5 fast and easy ways that you can use up your scraps with raw edge applique. Fabric scraps can easily overwhelm your sewing space unless you have a way to consume them. So stick with me and I'll show you how to do it. Hi, I'm Karen Brown of Just Get It Down Quilts. I give you tips, tricks, and strategies to help you make the quilt that you want to make. And if you like what you see, please hit that subscribe button. Fabric accumulates with every project, so you need projects and techniques to keep Mt Scrapmore under control. I have shown you how to use up your scraps in sampler blocks, strip blocks, and crumb projects. I have even shown you what to do with your batting scraps. Today's video is about using up your scraps with raw edge applique. Using raw edges means no piecing or hand sewing, which means it can be fast and simple. Applique is an ornamental technique where you put patches of fabric over a larger piece to form a picture or pattern.
For raw edge applique,
you'll also need fusible webbing. And in this video, I'm using FlexiFuse, the sponsor of this video.
So grab your scraps, scrap strips, scrap pieces, scrap batting, scrap binding. We're going to use it all.
In this method, you put defined shapes on a scrappy background. To demonstrate this method, I will be using these autumn leaves on this scrappy background to make placemats totally from my scraps. To make the leaves,
I found some clip art online, then printed it out.
Mark or trace your design on the paper side of the FlexiFuse. The paper side is the back side of the fusible web, so just know that your finished design will be a mirror of what you trace.
To conserve the fusible webbing, before I trace, I shift it around so the shapes are right up against each other. Next, roughly cut out the design.
Grab some scrap fabric in fall colors.
Your scraps will often have really deep creases, so give them a good press first. Then with the paper side up, fuse your shape to the wrong side of your fabric.
I use a piece of parchment paper over the fabric to ensure that any glue does not get on the faceplate of my iron. Then cut out your shape.
These leaves have a lot of detail, so I do a rough cut and then I do a second pass for the finer bits. I keep scrappy 2.5-inch squares beside my sewing table. And I'm grabbing a stack in black, gray, and white to make this scrappy buffalo check. First, I sew them into 4 patches, and then I sew those 4 patches together to make the background. Then I play with my shapes until I get a layout I like. Take it to your iron, and when you're happy with the layout, remove the paper and fuse in place.
I normally choose to do this in stages, as pieces can shift when you're not looking.
With a piece of scrap backing and scrap batting, I make a quilt sandwich.
And sew in place. Depending on the size and shape, you can do this with a straight stitch, you can do this with a zigzag, you can do it with a blanket stitch, and just sew around the outside edge. You may also decide to add in more detail, like these veins.
And I grabbed a couple of orphan jelly roll strips to make a 3/4-inch binding.
A fast and easy gift made completely from your scraps.
This method also works very well with scrap strips. You can make them straight or wonky to make up your background. And the patch on top can be both a positive and a negative image.
This method also works really well in table runners, tree skirts, and wall quilts.
So let's take a moment and talk about the fusible webbing.
Fusible webbing comes in sheets or rolls. One side is textured, which is the glue, and the other side is paper that you can draw on. Some varieties have paper on both sides, but one side comes off easily to reveal the textured side. And we fuse it with a hot iron to our fabric. And since there are many different types for many different purposes, you need to be sure to buy the right kind for quilting. Flexi Fuse first got on my radar a couple of years ago when a couple of fiber artists I know recommended it. I started using Flexi Fuse shortly after, but I became a true convert when I saw the difference in my work.
Which makes total sense when you realize it was developed by quilters for quilters.
For quilters, the most important features that we need are, we need a product that the needle can pierce easily, but doesn't leave a hole behind. We need a product that gives an even, flat fuse without the glue crumbling. And we need a product that doesn't leave glue on your needle, so that our thread doesn't shred as we sew it, or worse, break the needle. Trust me on this one. We also want a product that's soft and pliable, just like our quilts, even when we stack the webbing 3 or 4 layers thick. And Flexi Fuse does all of this. I also found that the letter size sheets were much more convenient to work with. It's easier to trace the shapes out, my shapes lie flatter as I arrange them, and they don't shift as much as I set the design.
If you act now, you can get 20% off your entire order with the discount code SCRAPPY2021.
This time, we cut out pieces and arrange them on a solid background. It's often called a collage. Collages can be quite literal, abstract, or something in the middle. We can make the collage layered or flat, and you can take advantage of your fabric's motifs to add interest. So dig into your scraps and make a stack.
This time we are fusing our fabric to the fusible webbing first, and then we are cutting out our shapes. And I'm just arranging the fabric so I can cover as much of the Flexi Fuse at one time as possible.
Cut out shapes as desired.
This is an improv exercise for myself. I'm just letting my brain relax and letting the scraps take me wherever they will. I decided that I'm only going to use squares and rectangles, but I'm also going to add in these circle motifs from some fabric scraps I have. I fiddle and adjust, I add in some more, until I finally have a design that I like and I take a photo. I reassemble it at my iron using my photograph as my guide, and I work in sections removing the paper. I grab a piece of scrap backing and scrap batting, and I make myself a quilt sandwich.
How you sew it depends on your design. I'm choosing to do just straight line quilting here. You may choose to add color and emphasis to certain areas. Just be sure that all pieces are secured.
Originally, I had intended this to be a pillow, but my family liked it so much I've made it a wall hanging. So I've gone to my scrap binding basket and I've pulled some strips to finish it off.
Lettering is always a great way to personalize any project. You can add a name, a special phrase, or even the alphabet. And you most likely have fabric left over from your current quilt top. So before they become scraps, you can use them to make the letters. On your computer, find a font that you like. Then increase the font size to what you require. To save ink, change the color to white and add an outline. This method is almost identical to method number 1. The difference is that there is a specific order that the letters must go in, and that whole design must be flipped backwards before tracing. Remember, the Flexi Fuse is fused to the back of the fabric. You trace your design on the paper side of the Flexi Fuse, then fuse the design to the wrong side of your fabric and cut out your shapes. You can see now that by making the letters in reverse, everything is going the way it should. Be sure to lay out your design here because it's amazing how easily your letters can get mixed up. This ensures that everything is where it should be, spelt the way it should be. And you can also deal with design issues like this corner before it's permanent. And again, I chose to do this in stages. This keeps it in a manageable amount, and I can keep all the letters aligned properly. You can choose to sew it in place now or when you quilt your quilt top. Sometimes your quilt needs something more, and unfortunately, you might not realize that until your binding goes on. If this has happened to you, grab your scraps, because one of the great things about raw edge applique is that it can be added after your quilt is quilted. When a quilt feels flat, it almost always goes back to value. So take a black and white photo. You can see that this quilt just needs a little bit more contrast. Your situation might be different. Maybe it just needs a pop of color. Or you have a very busy quilt and you need a center of interest. So place a couple of fabric scraps in a range of values and colors on your quilt. I find it very helpful to take photos and compare. You might even need to bring in some outside scraps. Once you find what fabrics solve the problem, then you can play with shapes, sizes, and how many. Sometimes it doesn't take a lot, and note that you can also layer them. Once you decide on a final design, fuse them to your quilt top. Because we're working on a finished quilt, you need to be mindful how you sew on your patches. You can add texture with dense quilting, a design with a pattern, and color with different threads. And now the quilt is truly finished. For many of these projects, you will end up with scrap fusible webbing. I save these bits and incorporate them into other projects. My favorite way to use them is postcards. Take a piece of scrap fabric, scrap batting, and some cardstock.
Set the cardstock aside while we build up our design. Sometimes I have a theme in mind. Sometimes I let the fabric guide me. When I've settled on a design, I remove the papers and I fuse in place. Then I quilt as the design demands. Then I grab my cardstock and put glue on the back, then tack down my design. I trim down my front piece so that it's the same size as the cardstock. I switch to my zigzag stitch, size 4mm, and my stitch length is around 0.75, and I stitch around the card. I trim up any loose threads or unevenness, and then I'm done.
Postcards have a huge payoff. They are wonderful sparks of color in someone's mail. If you want to watch my scrap busting playlist, I'm going to leave a link right here. If you are looking for some other fast and easy gift ideas, I'll also leave a link to that playlist. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Take care, and I'll see you next time.